everyone, and welcome to Love, Money, and Legacy, where we're going to talk about aligning your money with who and what you love. As always, we need to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. Just need to show the disclaimer, which essentially says that, investment advice is offered through Stratos Wealth Partners, and Wealth Advisory and Stratos are not affiliated. And remember, anything that we talk about is educational in nature. We're really not giving you legal advice, tax advice, or even insurance advice for your specific situation. If you do want that, you should follow up with us afterwards and we can get you to the appropriate person or party. So we're going to cover a bunch of great stuff today. I'll introduce our wonderful panelists. We'll talk about financial planning through the lens of love, and Julia will then take us through how your money story drives decisions. Samra will talk about estate planning and how it's a gift to those you love. And then Ben will speak for a moment or two on insurance planning and how that is an act of love. Then we're going to get to the fun part where we'll have an open discussion, a Q&A, and really talk about how this all relates to you and the people you care about. Our panelists include Samra Stevenson. Samra is an estate planning attorney. Ben Bazile, who is a regional director with Crump Life Insurance Services. Julia Steinberg, who is a money coach, and I can't wait for her to explain exactly what a money coach is and does. And then me, financial planner, senior wealth advisor with Muhammed Wealth Advisory. So I'll start by just introducing myself a little bit more for those of you who don't know me, and for those of you who do know me, oh well, you'll hear more about me. Anyway, I'm Muhammed. I've been a financial planner now for 25 years this month. And over that time, I really have seen so many of you struggle with how to take care of the people you love, including yourself, because self-care is really important. And so I wanted to have this conversation with these wonderful professionals to make sure that we talk about this, because as you can see on the screen, at M Wealth Advisory, we're focused on financial guidance for every stage of life. And so that's holistic wealth and retirement planning, tax efficient investment management, transition planning, and transitions include retirement. They include losing a spouse. They include divorce. There are all kinds of not so fun transitions, but then they're the fun ones. Retirement should be a fun one. Having children or grandchildren should be a fun one. And when you have family or causes you care about, then estate planning and estate coordination, you work closely with your estate planning attorneys, etc. And all of this is done as fee-based fiduciary advice. So that's enough about me. We're gonna talk a little bit about how your financial plan should really have multiple pieces working together to support who and what you love. So this is super corny. I'm the financial planner who gets excited about money and how it feeds your relationships, but it's a real thing. So your investment management, where you're seeking growth for your future goals, which again, that can include the people you care about. Like usually when you're thinking about your legacy, that is part of your financial plan, and that would overlap with estate planning. Risk management and insurance, it is what it sounds like. You're looking at how you preserve what you've built, whether that be disability insurance to protect your income in your working years, whether that be long-term care insurance to preserve your independence and your assets, so that whether it's your partner or your children, they're not scrambling to pay for care for you. Or life insurance. If there's someone who would financially suffer if you were to pass away, then you should make sure that there is some type of life insurance in place. And tax planning, death and taxes, the two sure things. Believe it or not, I think that is also something that is an act of love if you get that house in order. I have talked to so many people who part of the reason that they got divorced was because of money issues. Often if one spouse is not taking care of, their taxes and not strategically participating, doing things that will help lower pre-tax income and things of that nature, it really rubs the other person the wrong way. And then ultimately, if we're looking at retirement planning, that too is something that I would say is a gift to yourself and to those you love, I've seen too many parents who didn't save enough and put everything into their children. And then guess what? They are going to be dependent on those said children. Or if you haven't saved enough for you and your spouse to be able to retire and you're working till your last breath, that is also not, I would say, a good thing or a loving thing for you or the people you care about. So, corny, I know, financial planning through the lens of love. There's self-love. We should all take, I heard Whitney Houston's song, The Greatest Love of All, the other day, and I thought about it, and it's really true. I mean, obviously for a lot of us, our spiritual love is the greatest love, but when we look at it, that begins with us, in our relationship with our higher power. And then there's just caring for yourself. And retirement planning, as I just described, takes care of yourself. Insurance to protect or to preserve the people, the assets and income and so on. And then making sure that your investments are aligned with your values. For some people, that means different things than others. Partnership love. So it's love month. It's February. So I will say, and I can say this both personally and professionally, that communication is so key. Talking about your financial plan, talking about what you're looking to accomplish as a couple, those are really important things to do. And understanding where you're coming from. So I'm really excited when Julia talks about money stories. Family love. So that could be education funding, again, not at the risk of your retirement. Multi-generational wealth planning. I'm fortunate to work with multiple levels of some families, and that requires different type of planning than someone who's single and doesn't have kids. And then life insurance to, again, provide for their future, or if there's some form of income that's going to stop and prevent, whether it's children or your spouse, from living their best life, and that's in place. Legacy love, this is really important to talk about. I think it's often overlooked. It's not lost on me that I have clients who are amazing people who don't have blood family who's still alive, but they have their church family, they have causes that they're passionate about, and there's a legacy that they care about. This is true too for those who have children and family, but it's even more so when you're looking at, okay, what's going to happen to what's left? I want it to live, for myself to live on, and I've made a positive impact in the world. So that's another type of love. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julia. I'd love Julia to first introduce herself and who she is, what she does, and then we'll go into conversation on the money stories.
Thank you so much, Michelle. My name is Julia Steinberg, and I'm really excited to be here in a room with so many esteemed professionals. So I'm very honored that I'm part of this group. So thank you so much for having me join you, Michelle. So just a really quick background on me. I was in corporate finance for the first chapter of my career in a variety of different organizations, large and small, specifically focusing on financial operations and forecasting and planning. So that's my financial background. And then recently decided to leave the corporate world and decided to go. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I knew that it wasn't going to be with corporate, but I had all of this financial knowledge. And one of the things that I talk about a lot with my story, like my money story, just my story in general, is when I left corporate, our household income got cut by 40%, yet our lifestyle really didn't change. And that is not something that I realized is common and usual. So as I kind of with sitting without kind of work, thinking about what it was I wanted to do, I realized that because this is not something that most people know how to do or able to do, I wanted to get into a field where I can educate other women to be able to create the type of financial foundation for themselves that they can then, choose to leave a job, choose to leave a relationship, choose to leave something, and have freedom, to have the freedom essentially to be able to make those choices. And one of the things that I realized is the reason that my husband and I were able to create this type of lifestyle for ourselves that wasn't really impacted by cutting 40%. It was our relationship with money, right? So kind of like what Michelle was getting into earlier. It was our habits and our mindset around money. But it wasn't always like that, right? So what is your relationship with money? It is, what's your story with money? Your money story is essentially how you view money, what you think about money, what you believe about money. And that is shaped, it's starting from a very, very early age. It's shaped by your family circumstances. So it's like your close family, and then kind of further and further apart. It's shaped by the society that you grew up. It's shaped by the culture. It's shaped by what you see on TV. It's shaped by what you hear from your family kind of talking about money, right? It's shaped by all of these beliefs, experiences, emotions, things that you don't even realize that you're kind of picking up from the people around you. And what this does, this money relationship, it creates these beliefs in your mind. And off of these beliefs is how you then create your own patterns and create your own habits, and then ultimately your own actions around money. Right? And all of this is the foundation for everything that Michelle was talking about earlier. It's the foundation for how you think about tax planning. It's for the foundation about how you think about legacy planning. It's what you think about self-love. Money touches every single area in your life, every single area in your life. Like if you stop and think about that, right? And then the money behaviors that you see, they often exist on a massive spectrum. You have people that end up making a lot but are holding on too tight and afraid to let go, right? There's a lot of fear that's driving their decision making. You've got the other extreme end of the spectrum, which is the kind of the spending without any intention, without really being kind of conscious of it, right? And then you've got kind of the middle where it's like you want to be intentional with your spending, you want to know where it's going. And that's the place that you want to get to mentally before you start making decisions for your legacy, for your family, right? For your generational wealth, for your own self-love. It has to come from a place of clear, calm, kind of harmony between this holding on too tight and then spending without intention. And, one of the biggest drivers that kind of for your money is your values. That is your decision-making filter, right? So if you think about what's important to you and you start kind of like looking at where your money is going, that's usually a signal for you to tell what is important to you. Now, the thing that happens is because we grow up with a particular money story, it's very rare that we'll stop to actually intentionally create new beliefs that are based on like your new and current values. So like a lot of times what happens is you continue to kind of like behave based on, values and beliefs that you've inherited that one, you may not believe anymore, or two, you still do believe, and then you get to actively choose. Right? So this is kind of like the whole concept of like the money store and your money relationship. And then just kind of summing that up is you want to get to a place where your money decisions are made intentionally with a clear mind, instead of coming from a place that's emotionally driven. Emotionally driven, happy, that's one thing, but emotionally driven from like fear, from anxiety, from uncertainty, from not being clear, that is something that you want to work through in order to make decisions very intentionally. I'm just going to give one small example. Yesterday, I had a consult with a mom and a daughter. So the mom was in her 60s and the daughter was in her early 30s. And everything, Michelle, that you touched on today, from transitions to communication to self-care, that is what I saw in the interaction between like the mom and the daughter. Both of them coming from the same value, very well off, plenty of money. They were never afraid that they don't have money at the end, but both of them felt very uncertain and a little confused around their money. And that's because they've never intentionally stopped to explore their story, explore how to make an intentional, confident money decisions. So I'm going to stop right there. There's lots of wonderful speakers.
Thank you. No, that was great. And I'm looking forward to delving into that a little bit more when we have our panel discussion, so to speak. Awesome. Okay. So with that, I'm going to introduce, or rather, I'm going to ask Samra Stevenson to introduce herself as she talks about estate planning and how that's part of your love story.
Oh, a love story. Right on time for Valentine's Day, right? My name is Samra Stevenson. I'm a practicing attorney. I'm a practicing attorney here at Stein Sperling in Rockville, Maryland. I focus on trusts and estates, specifically estate administration and some trademark work, but we're here talking about planning today. And really, I really try and emphasize when I'm talking to people about planning, and I love that we're approaching this from an act of love, because it is also in its self-care. the act of planning. And I'll say this to you, I think when Michelle was introducing some of these concepts and when it becomes applicable, the only thing you missed, Michelle, was that if you're over the age of 18, this applies to you. You don't have to have a certain number of kids or a certain number of assets or a certain number of homes or any home at all. If you're over the age of 18, there is a plan in place for you if you haven't made one. It's the state's plan, and so I'll get into that a little bit more. Can I advance to the next slide? I often like to talk about estate planning as being a misnomer, the title estate planning, right? It's more like life planning. It's more like we need to talk about making a plan for how things are going to be handled in all of life's circumstances. So in that sense, it goes beyond just being about you. It's about your family. It's about your clients. It's about your employees. If you own a business, I talk to a lot of small business owners. And so it's about more than you, but the act of self-care, you benefit, but the people that you're doing the planning, the other people in your life benefit from your planning as well. Next slide. And I mentioned earlier, if you don't make a plan, the state has a plan for you. And there are very specific plans when it comes to the legal process with regards to either end-of-life planning. If we don't have a plan, it's called probate or estate administration. And if we're talking about incapacity, so we talk about end-of-life, but what if something happens to you and you're incapacitated? If you haven't put the proper documents in place, that looks like guardianship. And both of those processes involve the court, involve making your information in your family business public to the world, involve hefty attorney's fees in most cases, and they're, most importantly, a very slow process. And we're talking about planning for instances in which immediate response is required in a lot of cases. I talk to a lot of families with small children, and we give more instructions to the babysitter than we do to our family about if something happens to us, right? Home from dinner and you're incapacitated. Who's taking care of those children other than CPS or the state? Do you have something in place and a conversation with your family about what that looks like? When we talk about planning needs, there are a number of resources, but there are 5 basic documents that I really encourage people to think about. And that's going to be a will or a trust, a power of attorney, a medical advance directive, or goes hand in hand with what we call a living will, and a final disposition. And Michelle, I'll pause here. How in-depth should I could talk about each of these documents for quite a bit of time. So
I think high level is fine because, hopefully for those who are my clients, we would have spoken about this to some extent,
Sure.
maybe not to the same level as you would, but, as part of the financial planning process. But I guess if you want to put one line towards each, that would be helpful. What does a will do? What does a trust do? What does the power of attorney do? Gosh, that's a lot of lines. Healthcare directive, living will, final disposition.
Yeah, I'm going to group them will and trust together, and then I'll group the incapacity planning documents.
Okay, sounds good.
So last will and testament, I usually tell people, your bare minimum line of defense is going to be creating a last will and testament that's going to make clear what your wishes are. If you'd like to take it a step further, you want to talk to an attorney about trust planning and what that looks like. Trusts are great tools for keeping your information private and making sure that there's not a lot of work to do after you've passed away for your family. It keeps your information private outside of the court's purview and also eliminates the need for administrative fees, attorney's fees, court costs associated with administering your estate. Your final disposition, I can't read it. Your power of attorney and your medical advance directive are what we call incapacity planning documents. So a very important part of your planning, not just about when you pass away. If you're incapacitated, who's going to be able to make decisions for you about your finances, who can pay your bills, who's making decisions about your medical care. Again, if you make a plan, it's on paper, it's written, you're good to go. If we don't make a plan, the state has a plan for you. And more importantly, if you haven't made a plan, you don't know who is going to be stepping in to speak for you. There are plenty of horror stories I can think of, one of being a client of mine who had a brain aneurysm. She was relatively young, in her early 50s, had a brain aneurysm. She was also 3 years estranged from her husband. And what happened was when she ended up in the ICU, a estranged husband moved himself back into her house. And she didn't have the proper documents in place to make clear that she didn't want him deciding things for her. Okay, so these are the things we need to think about long before we get to when we're thinking about passing away, per se. Lastly, I'm just going to highlight a final disposition. So this is an example of a standalone document. I would encourage you to talk to an attorney about standalone documents. Standalone documents highlight certain wishes. For example, a final disposition is going to highlight how you would like your remains to be handled. Often mentioned in a will or a trust, but nobody's reading that full document in a crisis, right? We want to make sure that everything is easily accessible for families. and so that our wishes are respected. And the other thing I say is that people go from grief to greed very quickly. And so greed is not always about money. Sometimes it's about power and control. And so something like a final disposition, making clear who's in charge of how your remains are handled, also very important document. Plenty of horror stories on that one too. Next slide. Thank you. 3 common trusts. Plenty of misinformation floating around online. 3 common trusts you can think about considering utilizing. One is going to be a testamentary trust. It's language in a last will and testament that gives directions for a trust to be created. So it doesn't exist while you're here, but it is a safeguard, especially people with minor children. I like to refer to it as a springing trust, right? It springs up if it becomes necessary. If you pass away and your intentions were that nobody under 25 inherit from you and everybody's 25 and up, that trust never comes into fruition, right? A revocable trust, which is a living, breathing document while you're here. I like to think of it as a lockbox holding on to our assets while we're here. And it is a tool for making sure that our assets are protected from things like creditors, all those things when we pass them down to the next generation. So a great generational wealth planning tool. Special needs trust, a very important asset for anybody who has any beneficiaries or anybody close to them that with special needs who might be receiving benefits from the state. And I would encourage you to think about that if that is your circumstance and make sure you have a plan in place for dealing with that. So all of these things, all of these tools are part of self-love and self-care because it's part of not only caring for the people around you, but caring for yourself and making sure you're taking those steps and not leaving the state's plan to be applicable for you and leaving yourself in that slow churning process that we call the court system. I'm looking forward to the rest of our conversation today.
Thanks so much, Samra. I know that we put you to the test there because there's so much you could talk about with estate planning.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate that you giving us that overview. Thank you, Samra. And Ben Bazile is our next panelist, and I think his topic of insurance planning as an act of love really fits very well and flows from Samra's conversation because estate planning, insurance planning are often interwoven when we're looking at preserving assets and things of that nature. I'll also mention that Ben's going to introduce himself in a more substantive way, but he supports me and other advisors as we help clients determine the amount of different types of insurance that they may need to support their financial plan and the people they care about, as well as which companies would be the best. So he typically is an extended part of my team and so many other financial planning teams. With that, Ben, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how
Sure.
you see insurance planning as an act of love?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here with the panel today, and I'm actually happy that I am going last because I'm going to talk a little bit about insurance. And insurance, as Michelle said, it really plays a part in the entire plan, right? Your discussion of how you handle your money and what you want to do with your money, and how you handle your estate and what you'd like to happen at the end with that estate and for your family. All these things tie back into some preservation planning, and that's where insurance comes into play. I have a background for the last 30 years in insurance. I started out my career as a financial planner with a company called Prudential, but I found very quickly that I really enjoyed one aspect of planning the most, and that was the preservation planning. And for anybody that has seen a financial pyramid, that's the very bottom of the pyramid, the foundation of that pyramid. And then all of the other planning that we do, our savings, our legacy, our advanced planning, that all happens later or on top of having a good solid foundation of protection underneath it. So when you get into insurance, there's a couple key aspects of it, and I'll highlight a few of those for us today. But as Michelle said, my role now as a protection specialist is to work behind the scenes for advisors like Michelle, helping them come up with solutions based on the conversations that she and other advisors have had with their clients. What are their goals? What are their assets today? What would they like to have happen in the future? What's the plan for college, for retirement, for leaving a legacy? Well, we help fulfill all of those different holes that might be in the plan. And we also help our clients, like Michelle, navigate all of the various insurance carriers that are out there in the world. So there's a lot to take in, but we kind of help simplify that for them. So when we're talking about insurance, we're Our first topic would be disability insurance. And when you're looking at disability insurance, that's really to protect your income. When you look at somebody's income, that's actually the largest asset that they would actually have in their portfolio. Their ability to generate an income and have that income coming into the household for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that's the biggest asset. And we look to protect that asset. Then we kind of segue into life insurance. Again, often an act of love for somebody or others, where again, we're protecting that ability to bring in an income. If you're looking at having, two young children, maybe with, 20 years, 25 years in the household and the responsibility of them being in that household, that's how we would replace an income, or even being able to replace the ability for college education, making sure that our desire to have our children go to college still goes on, or that our spouse still has a comfortable retirement, and that our grandchildren still have a legacy, whether or not we were here to fulfill that or not. And that's the beauty of having a plan in place and giving the client the peace of mind knowing that all those hopes, all those dreams, they will be fulfilled, even if the unfortunate should happen. And then we get into long-term care planning, often misunderstood, but long-term care planning is really about protecting individuals' independence and their ability to keep the decisions and all of the choices in their court. It's also about preserving family structure. When, as we get older, we start to need a little bit of assistance or need a little bit more care, and that often becomes challenging for the family to manage. And having your own insurance can help preserve the family structure where it doesn't become a burden on the family. It also is there to protect the assets, so that we're not going through assets too fast and maybe spending down even our healthy partner's retirement and possibly even our children's legacy money. So long-term care planning is an integral part in the long-term planning of a client's assets and their desires to grow their money and leave their money behind. So that's kind of a high level. As you know, with all insurance products, we could go really, really deep into a lot of different areas.
And so what I'm going to ask everyone to do in the audience is just to type in your questions. Let us know. There are some that we received ahead of time, so I'll go ahead and ask those. Please put your questions in and we'll do our best to get to them in the time that we have allotted, or we can follow up with you afterwards. So I am going to stop sharing my screen so you can see these lovely faces. And I guess I'll start with you, Julia. I would ask, and this is something that I've seen a lot, how do you help people get unstuck from the weight of their past, the luggage, if you will? Because I know what you do is different than what I do, where I'm doing the financial planning, but what you do is so important. So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Thank you. So I think, unstuck from your past, I think we first start with realizing that just because things have been done that way does not mean that they have to continue to be done that way, right? So a lot of times, like when I'll work with clients, like some of the kind of like beliefs and thoughts come up. It's like, I'm trying to think of something. For example, kind of talking about unstuck. I had a client that she's an entrepreneur, and she was like, her time was really, really tight. And I was kind of pushing her to kind of offload some of these activities that she was doing to free up her time, right? She is a real estate agent, so she's an entrepreneur, grew up blue collar. And she said to me, this is so illuminating. She's like, I didn't think people like me, blue collar, kind of have the right to hire help, right? And that is a big, I think, kind of like money block. And that is like these types of thoughts. Like you don't think about that, but that type of thought keeps you stuck, right? That keeps you from moving forward, from expanding your life, from elevating, your wealth. Like those are the types of things that keep you stuck. So a lot of the times, like the way that we work together is like just through conversation. Because like really my ultimate goal with a client is to get them to a really simple money system. They know where their money is coming in and out. They've got a lot of clarity on their goals. We create a plan and I work with them to kind of get there. And then part of their goals could be like the financial planning, right? So we do more of the kind of foundational work of like money in, money out. But behind all of that, the reason for their habits the way they are is their mindset. It's stuff like blue collar people don't get help. So then you're stuck using your time when your time could be used for something significantly more valuable to grow your wealth, right? So a lot of the times getting them unstuck is helping them see that like what their belief is, because a lot of people just kind of continue operating on their hamster wheel autopilot. They don't even realize the actual thoughts that they're having that's creating the situation that they're in. So it's one, giving them the awareness of it, kind of like showing it back to them, speaking it back to them. And the second part is really just kind of challenging that, like, says who, right? Like, we get to determine what we believe and what we think and we want to do. And once we're able to kind of get over that hump, get unstuck. I had a session with her afterwards. She's like, oh my God. She's like, I hired for my marketing. I hired to like get my clothes cleaned. She's like, I hired someone to come and clean my house. You could see the momentum develop, and that is how you get unstuck, by the awareness of what's keeping you there and then actually making a choice to do something about that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's funny. We had a financial date night, my husband and I, recently, and it was it was a good conversation. I'm really glad we had it. And I would say that I was surprised after over 20 years of marriage, how I'm still we're still learning to communicate, because we have very different money stories and possibly money beliefs. Fortunately, we love the same people, our family, etc. But we had like some challenging discussions where it was like, okay, what are the things that are important to us in this moment? And, what do we need to do or change? And we both had to give, right?
Yeah.
And out of that comes like such a feeling of togetherness and closeness. Mm-hmm. But I, again, was just blown away by the fact that I'm like, if we didn't sit down and communicate, we probably would have both still had these narratives about each other, even though we know each other and love each other, about like, this is what you are doing with the money, or, I'm doing with the money, or what you think or you want. And it was just like, hey, let's look through everything. Let's see where things are. Let's make some changes together. It's not just me. It's not just you. Let's come to an agreement. And I heard another financial advisor say this, that like, there's nothing sexier than a financial date night. And I actually agree, because I think, again,
totally
you're communicating.
Agree. Yes, I love it.
Yeah, you're communicating. And then even better, if you actually follow up and do the action items and make the changes, I gotta say that's a whole different level. So I hear you. So Ben, when you were talking about insurance, it just made me think about people are always asking, and actually that was one of the questions that we got, like, come on, insurance and love, like, what are you talking about? It's just like somebody trying to sell something. And I have had several situations over my 25 years where, to me, it was a no-brainer that, like, you could, if I'm not mistaken, foreclosures, they're more likely to happen due to disability than to death. Maybe for obvious reasons. If you're not alive, you don't have to worry about foreclosing. But I mean, if you're married or partnered, that would still be an issue, like that income going away. But it's been fascinating to me, and this does overlap a little bit with the psychology of money, how people are like, oh no, I don't need to spend all that money to insure my income. We're talking about people who could be very specialized in their fields, and in my opinion, if you go from earning a really good salary or income, if it's not salary, like whatever, commissions, bonus, whatever, and go to doing work that you can do, but it pays a heck of a lot less, that to me seems like something very preventable. So can you speak about that, please? Because I feel like there are so many people who think it's just like a crop, getting disability insurance.
Absolutely. It is a hurdle sometimes when you have to have conversations with people that cost them money, right? In their mind, it's costing them money. But what we're really doing is freeing them, right? Freeing them to make decisions to move forward in life without having the fears that drag you down. That's a lot of the money concerns, right? Having those fears that what would happen, or how is this going to work out, or who's actually going to manage having my kids get through school, because I was the one who always kind of pushed them. But a lot of these things are alleviated. I have had the pleasure, I actually would say, of delivering claims checks and actually processing and helping with the processing of claims checks. So I've seen it firsthand what it meant that a family was actually going to be staying in their home and the kids were actually going to continue on and go to college. And as I said before, I've been doing this for now almost 30 years. I've seen kids that have gone to college and grew up in their childhood homes. So those are very real concerns. But, sometimes it takes a moment for someone to really understand our process. So I use different analogies to help them understand it. So you go and you've got your first paycheck, it's amazing. You're starting to make money and you're single. And the first thing you do is you go and get your dream car. And you know what? You've had enough money and you've bought it outright in cash if you were so fortunate. So now you've got this wonderful, Honda or Accord or whatever it is, and it's your dream car. Now, you don't have to buy full coverage insurance on it. But would you dream of not having that wonderful little asset that you've just created? Would you even fathom driving down the road uninsured? No, you just wouldn't. This is too valuable for you, right? This is an asset you've been thinking about and dreaming about. Well, now take a step back. As I said before, that asset is nothing in comparison to the asset you are. You're an asset. The asset is you and the ability to bring in a check, to bring in an income stream. You are the biggest dividend that you will ever have in your lifetime. And to think that you would walk around leaving that dividend unprotected, it's amazing how people don't understand that until you kind of put it into context or terms or things that they appreciate. So as the financial planner, you get to know the client a little bit more. Joe loves fishing and he has a fishing boat. So we're going to talk about that. Mary has a hobby and she's got she shed in the backyard and she builds all of her, little, fun things. So you find out what things are important to them and you ask them, would you just leave that completely exposed? And a lot of times it really resonates.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that I have lots of conversations, as you know, about long-term care insurance as well. And I will tell you that I've had a number of instances now in this 25 years where we talked about it and I'm like, hey, this can help you preserve your independence. It can help preserve assets and things of that nature. And folks are like, I'm going to be okay. And believe me, I do the analysis because there are people who have enough assets that they don't need it, or maybe they have guaranteed income in the form of pensions or things of that nature that cover everything. That's fine. As a fiduciary, I'm not going to tell you to consider a solution that you don't need. But most often when someone comes back to me after saying no, especially if it's been like a couple years or more, they've gotten a diagnosis, right? And they're uninsurable now. And it breaks my heart because there's nothing I can do, right? I feel like I've done what I could do in informing them, but I always do the due diligence and say, let's check and see, but you're pretty much uninsurable if you have certain conditions that make you go, I need this now, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of love stories, I would say so many folks, as their parents live longer and longer, are starting to see situations where a parent needs long-term care. They need care in a either assisted living at home or in a full-on nursing home or a memory care unit. And it's actually, it can weigh on folks because they're working still and their parents need this care, and because the parents didn't have that type of insurance in place, it's like everyone's scrambling. I would say having those conversations ahead of time is really, it's not only an act of love, it's just, I would say, a way to really preserve so many things, including relationships and including your dignity and things of that nature.
If you don't mind, if I could comment on that, one of the things you just said is really important, relationships, protecting relationships. See, oftentimes when we get into insurance concepts or topics. We're talking about, what it means monetarily. What will I get if this happens? How much will I receive when that happens? And how do I get to the money? But it's not about the money always. It's about the family. It's about preserving the family structure. So, oftentimes I'll ask a client to stop for a moment and just think about this. You have 3 children, right? One child lives nearby, close proximity, 2 live far away. Something were to happen to you today, most likely the child who's close to you is going to be doing a lot of the help, right? So let me ask you this. How is it going to affect the relationship with their 2 siblings 2 to 10 years down the road? Will there be animosity? Will there be strife? Now one person stopped working to take care of mom and dad. Because they stopped working, their eldest child didn't go to college. Is that the kind of family strife and baggage that you want to leave behind or burden upon your family? And that oftentimes is enough for people to really understand what long-term care planning means. And you also pointed something else out. We're all going to be seeing situations where some kind of help is needed. So long-term care is not, I don't really like the term, but it's not about nursing homes. What it really is about is having income or money coming in when we're living longer. Maybe not always better, but longer. And as a society, more people turn 65 than are born. So, and we're living longer, right, with medications and advances in technology. So there's going to be a time when, on the average, people are going to be into their 80s and 90s, and you start to slow down, and you need a little bit of help. So what money is going to be available for that day? That's really the conversation.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I think if we put the people and the relationships and the impact, focus, then everything else falls into place, because there is a cost associated with almost everything. Julia was talking about her client who was like, oh, I paid someone to clean, I paid someone to do this, that, and the other. And what that gave her was freedom of time, which could give her the opportunity to earn more, could give her the opportunity to enjoy life more, actually enjoy what she's working for. So thank you, Ben. Samra, so estate planning. I found that, it's a downer in terms of like the conversation, right? That being said, I feel like it's one of those things. I always tell people, if you forget about this and you push it to the side and you push it back because you don't want to deal with whatever emotions or making choices, etc., as you pointed out, the choices will be made for you, right? And they may not be the choices that you would want, but even it's actually empowering to make some decisions and then, and control what you can control and leave the rest to your higher power, So can you talk about just some of the, like, if you have any stories or maybe even some guidance on how people can, I asked Julie about getting unstuck there. I find that with estate planning, people can get stuck and be like, oh, I have all this to figure out. I should wait until I have it all figured out. And then they may not be around. A personal story, I had a family member who went into the hospital. She was a JD. She and her husband had estate planning documents that had been created for them. And she said, I'll sign them when I get out of the hospital. She did not come out of the hospital alive. And that there was a lot that came out of that in the particular state they were living in. It required not only probate, but it was expensive. It wasn't like, a simple process. And it was all preventable with a signature and possibly a notarization as well. So can you talk about how people can get unstuck when it comes to this concept?
Yeah, unstuck or never get started, right? Well, first, Ben, I never had a she shed, but I did have a queen cave that I loved very much, my basement. And then I had kids, and now it was renamed Lamine Land. That's my son's name. But yeah, there was a time. Yes, Michelle.
You gotta explain what the difference between a queen cave and a she shed is.
I think the she shed is removed from the house, separated in the backyard, and the queen cave is where you go down.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Man cave, queen cave. Got it. Okay. All right.
Yeah, but great topic. I mean, I talk a lot, especially around the times of the holidays. One of the seminars that I give, or the webinars I give on a regular basis, is talking to families about estate planning, because really it's one of those things where, just like your relationship with money dictates how you respond emotionally to things, your relationship with grief or these subject matters is going to dictate your willingness to talk about them. And so there's a lot of different hurdles that can be there. Both it can be families can get into a place where they can't talk about it because of generational or age differences. Maybe in some families, talking to an elder about this is not considered respectful. How do we go about talking about that? There's superstitions. Some people believe if you talk about a will, you're going to die the next day. You create a will, you die immediately after. So those are all different things where it can be difficult, or maybe just not the typical avoidance and just putting it off, like Michelle was saying. And so there are a lot of different things we can think about when it comes to talking to families about estate planning control, and there are things we can't control. So I like to talk about the things we can control. There's external factors and internal factors. Some of the external factors you can control are going to be things like where and when. Where and when are you talking about it? Are you keeping in mind privacy, and not in terms of what privacy means to you? What does privacy mean to the other people? Maybe the Thanksgiving table is a great option for your family, but for one family, but maybe not the other. Who are we including, right? Who are we including? Everybody in this conversation who needs to be here, even somebody who you may think their opinion is not as important, but are they relevant to the conversation? Do they need to be here for us to have a complete conversation? Who are we excluding? Maybe there's some agitators who aren't going to be helpful to the conversation leading to something fruitful. Setting a start time and an end time. These are emotional conversations. Going in thinking we can just talk forever might lead to a deterioration at some point. When are we going to table this and come back for more later, right? And then actually having action items thought out so we know what we've accomplished and what we're doing next. Internal factors we can control are more things like how we're coming to the table from an internal perspective. There's a concept that I like to talk about called confident vulnerability, right? So we're making ourselves vulnerable to our loved ones in a way that's saying, hey, mom and dad, I want to be able to love you the way you want me to love you. I want to be able to care for you. Can we talk about these documents just to make sure? Whatever the relationship is, getting in touch with why you're genuinely going to that person, your emotional motivations, and expressing those completely. And this is a lot of being thoughtful. Also, mom brain moment. Seeking out the information you need prior to going in. So attending seminars like this where you're getting the information you need to bring back to your family. Taking the step of doing your own planning before you're telling somebody else they need to do theirs. Always a good one too. Yeah. So talking to families about estate planning is an intentional process. And so you should be thoughtful about it. I often say that the holidays are a good time to do it because everyone's in one room, but really it's all times. You can always find an excuse where it's a good time. The summer as well, like people getting together, 4th of July, that kind of thing. But the most important thing is that you're having the conversation, because just like Michelle was saying, if we don't have the conversation, if it's not in writing and on paper, it's not real. I'm dealing with plenty of crises right now where it was somebody's intention. Dad said I have the house. Dad said I got this. Maybe dad even made a 2022 will but didn't sign it, right? So now we're dealing with the 1974 will. So this is family planning. And then if we take it a step further in terms of just being loving to our family, how we leave things to them matters. So how I leave things to my children, to my minor children, matters. If I set it up in a way that allows them to operate with assets that are liability free in some way, I know this is very surface level, but there are ways to leave things to the next generation that gives them a step up, right? A gift as little as $10,000, and I don't consider $10,000 little, but in terms of the big picture, a gift as little as $10,000 is enough to change somebody's trajectory from living paycheck to paycheck to something else, and that's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember working in the high net worth division of Fidelity many years ago, and it changed the way I thought about certain things, because I was like, okay, hopefully many years from now, because my kids are young teens, I'll be a grandparent, and I want to be able to do some of the things that I saw people doing and I see people doing, whether it's supporting in terms of helping pay for daycare or private school if that's important to you, or just being there so that there's not a need for that same a higher level cost for childcare. Just different things, and being able to have the wherewithal to go if my kids are not close by, to support them, if they're in a different state or whatnot. And all of that takes planning. But I think that, to your point, it's all about thinking about it, it's communicating about it. I have seen so many situations where people are fighting. Like you said, it goes from grief to greed real fast. And I think it was perfect what you said, that the greed is not always monetary. I think sometimes it's about that money story that Julia was talking about. Sometimes it's somebody's hurt because they feel they should have gotten something they didn't get. It could be a painting, right? It could be, the sewing machine that is like has a lot of sentimental value, but really nobody's gonna buy that thing for like much. But it's just the littlest things. And then even the family house. That's one that I've seen even in my own family play out where not for us, we didn't have any like rancor where it broke down completely. But if there had been maybe some life insurance in place so that the multiple children who inherited a house could basically say, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to buy you out or not because you don't want to sell this house or you don't want this house or whatever. So there's just a lot, like you said, that has to do with whether it's during the holidays or summer or whenever, communicating and making it clear what you want and then actually signing the darn document. Getting that done. So that's a really good point. I'm going to open it up to you all. Like, are there any things that as we, get towards the end of our conversation, any stories or just comments that you want to make as we talk about this, and during this Love Month of February, during this Black History Month, etc., when we're talking about love, money, and legacy? Is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered that you feel is important?
I think one thing I just want to add, I think that the string that kind of connects all of us and like all of these topics is the concept of looking at things from a long-term perspective versus just a short-term perspective, right? All of our topics are about kind of like preparing, planning, taking care of ourselves, self-love, right? All of that is part of love, is the preparation and the planning. So as everybody was talking, that's kind of what came up for me is like, there's this string of like understanding how to value long-term while also enjoying your life in the short term, right? And that goes with like the life insurance and the estate planning and all of that and financial planning. So that would be the only thing that I would want to say that kind of like ties us, I feel like, all together.
That's really important. Thank you, Julia.
If you don't mind, I would say, there's a lot of things that we covered today. And oftentimes when dealing with clients, I see analysis paralysis because there's so many things that we just got, hit with. So my takeaway would be take one piece of information that you got today and put some action behind it. Don't tackle everything. It will get done. You will keep going, but you don't start your new diet, go to the gym, also, fix your finances and all of these things on, January 1st and then stick with it. So just start small, start the process and it'll all start to come into place.
That's a really good point, Ben. And I think a lot of times, like I'll do an annual review with folks and we identify certain things. And sometimes we need to have separate meetings for different topics because it can become overwhelming and you can get paralyzed. And that's really where I'm there to help folks through some of this.
If you don't make a plan for you, the state has one. If you don't make a plan, the state has one for you. And that's true. I mean, the only thing, as Michelle said, guaranteed is death and taxes. So there is a plan in place if you don't write one down. If you're comfortable with the state's plan, feel free to do nothing. But if you're not, then now's the time to do something.
Well, I think on that note, we'll say goodbye. Thank you to everyone who sent questions, who's participated in this, and we encourage you, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to send them. I'll make sure they get to the right person or use the contact information that you saw before. With that, happy Love Month, happy Black History Month. Remember that we, as Samra said, we can and should control the things we can control. The other things, we gotta let them go. But by making small actions and tackling it bit by bit, eating the elephant one bite at a time, as Ben said, we really can make huge progress. And then as Julia said, let's tap into our money stories, both from a positive and from what's weighing us down perspective. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out, because I will tell you, whether you're in retirement or still building your life for yourself and your family, if you don't deal with it, you can end up in a situation where you've got tons of money, but you won't spend it because you're still bogged down. Or conversely, you can end up in a situation where you don't have a lot of money because you spent it all. This is a wrap. It's been fantastic. Again, happy Love Month, happy Black History Month. Take care. Take care. Bye.
Bye.